Thank you so much. When I think of the March for Life, one of the I've been going to the march for almost every year, probably since college. But one of the most memorable images I have of it is watching it from inside the Supreme Court building the year that I clerked for Justice Thomas. This is now, that was like 2007. So it's been a few years, and I feel like the types of protests you see at the court have really changed. Back then, it used to be that if you had, you know, 20 people out there in front of the court, we were like, oh wow, check this out. This is a big group. But there were two events that were always a little different. One is there was a group of students that every day would be standing on the front of at the Supreme Court, and they would have a piece of tape over their mouth that said life, and they were just praying there. And I remember thinking, as I'd walk past them every day in and out of the building, and just think of the dedication and the prayers that were sustaining this movement. And then the other, which is sort of on the opposite end, was this annual March for Life. And instead of the maybe 20 people that you might see standing out there, it was just, you kind of can't describe it. You're standing inside of the building, and it's almost like this entire building is being enveloped by waves and just a tsunami of people. So they start midday, after everyone finally makes it after the rally in the mall, and then it's just hours of people filing by, and it's the entire street. And see, when you can just feel how different that event is from watching it. In the chambers that Justice Thomas was in happened to it was under construction, so it's not as normal chambers, but they happened to face out the front. So it was really amazing just to pop back and forth different times during the day to see that. It was one of the only years I didn't attend the march because I wasn't able to as a court employee, but I will never forget that image. This year, as people come to the Supreme Court, it's going to be one of the most significant years, I think, for the march yet. We often have had cases coming before the Supreme Court that have touched on abortion in various ways, that are taking, and the Supreme Court loves to kind of work in stepwise fashion. Well, we have had since 1973 numerous cases that have taken Roe, that have reworked the language, that have rewritten parts of it, that have moved the law in sometimes very very small but significant ways, like the partial birth abortion case, in the right direction. So this is an issue that the court has been working on, that has been a stepwise process for now nearly 50 years. And yet this term, the court has an opportunity before it like none that it has ever had before with the Dobbs case. The 15-week abortion ban in Mississippi right now presents a really unique opportunity for the court. First, because the ban is actually, I think, squarely within where probably the average American is on abortion. If you look at polling, a lot of people think they like the idea of Roe versus Wade, but if you drill down and ask them what they really think, you realize that most Americans actually have an instinct that, after the first trimester, we don't want abortions going this late. I think especially as Dr. Christie so articulately was describing ultrasounds, and we're all very familiar now with fetal development in a way that we weren't in 1973, right? And so people recognize that this isn't something that we want to see happening at the very least at a late stage in pregnancy. And late being, by the time you're 15 weeks old, we can tell the child's sex by the ultrasound. A lot of women have already seen their babies at that point, even just in the normal course of things. It's also something that a case that uniquely makes it difficult for the court to come to any other conclusion but that Roe and Casey and their progeny it must be overturned. There isn't this is, often, as I said, the court likes to move in stepwise fashion. They like to have an opportunity to say, well, maybe we won't extend this precedent that has a problem with it to this case, but But in the case before us, we can find a way to allow it to be preserved and still come to what we know is the correct legal result. Well, in this case, we now have a majority of justices in the Supreme Court, thanks particularly to the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett, which we celebrated the anniversary of yesterday. A majority of justices who believe the Constitution must be interpreted according to its original understanding and its original meaning. That approach to the Constitution really makes the question of Roe pretty straightforward and open and shut. There is no question. I think even if you talk to many pro-choice scholars who are honest enough to risk the cancel culture wrath, they will acknowledge that Roe and Casey don't have a lot of constitutional law behind them. There is clearly the original understanding of no aspect of the Constitution was that it prohibited any limitations on abortion. And we know this because for almost all of our American history, up until 1973, the vast majority of states outlawed abortion for most of the pregnancy. So it should be a very easy question for the justices. But we also know that they are going to be under the most intense pressure campaign that maybe the Supreme Court has ever experienced. We're seeing this already in the number of op-eds, in the number of people suggesting that, well, the popularity of the court is falling, and this is just going to be the last nail in the coffin for that. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there's a lot of Americans who would be relieved to see that the court was willing to stand up to that pressure and do what they know is legally right in the face of it, and that would actually bolster a lot of people's confidence in the court. But needless to say, that's not the way the media is spinning it. We've seen people protesting at the justices' houses, like Justice Kavanaugh, who the day that the response briefs were due in the Dobbs case, had people at his family home protesting, which I really think, again, even a lot of people on the left acknowledge that's a bridge too far when you have young children at home. It's one thing to be protesting in front of the court, and it's another thing to go to a place of residence, and the level of the intimidation and threats is very serious. And we also have seen a huge amount of threats in terms of against the institution of the court, and a lot of people suggesting that there should be changes to the number of justices in the court, and using this case as an example. I know we know that that's not the real reason. They've been asking to add members to the court and pack the court, frankly, since Justice Gorsuch was confirmed, and at every possible intervening inflection point, that it's another good excuse for some of the loud voices and the deep pockets of the dark money left to say, hey, let's pack the court now, and now is our excuse. So they, of course, will use this as an excuse to call for court packing, but on a positive note, that's something that most Americans recognize would be very bad for the court and bad for the country, and I don't think they will have the ability to do so. What worries me is whether they will have the ability to make enough of a threat of it that it will intimidate the justices into maybe coming up with a result in the case that is less than clear, or less than going fully and acknowledging the legal bankruptcy of Roe. We know the court's going to be called political yet again, as they always are, if they vote in a way that the left doesn't agree with. But that's really just name calling, and what we all need to be hoping and praying for is that the court is willing to avoid the actual political result, which would be coming to a conclusion that is not what their legal judgment leads them to, but a conclusion that is based on their fear of what the political consequences might be. I think for those in the pro-life movement, that's also a call to make sure that people understand the real ramifications of this decision, because if the court does overturn Roe, that doesn't give the pro-life movement everything it's wanted and been fighting for the last 50 years. It really just puts the ball back in their courts. It means that instead of every year marching on the Supreme Court in D.C., there should be 50 different marches for life, because the opportunity then will be for the American people to make their own laws on this issue. And that doesn't mean they're going to all look the way that the people in this room would like them to see. We're going to have Texas, and we're going to have Georgia, and we're going to have Mississippi, and states that are enacting pro-life legislation, but you're also going to have states like California and states like New York, states where abortion is legal not only all 9 months, but maybe, as my own governor suggests, a little bit after that. Maybe we should be leaving the babies to die after a failed abortion. So there's a long path ahead. But I think that the March for Life has shown that they are up for playing the long game, and I know that that all of us can look forward to that step in the battle with optimism and with encouragement, because I think that will allow the American people to actually have a voice in how they want their laws to look, and hopefully we can make that appeal to the American people to recognize, again, the humanity of the fetus, the equality of the child in the womb. And remember, I think, as we go up to the Supreme Court for this year's March for Life, it'll be after the Supreme Court hears the Dobbs case. They will have already heard the case. They will have already voted on the case. But we know from past experience that's not necessarily the last word. So we need to keep on fighting. We need to keep on talking about this issue, making sure people understand the stakes. But I think it will be hard for those justices, when you look at the Supreme Court building, one of the things I love about it is the inscription underneath the very front of the building. I mean, it says equal justice under law. So I think if we can keep this focus on the significance and the equality of the child in the womb, and keep praying, keep working, and keep fighting for this issue, hopefully we'll have some good news in June that will move us in the right direction and continue to promote that equality under law that the Supreme Court is supposed to stand for. Thank you.